Hey everybody, we are back again. We are in video 12 and it is really going really well. It's one of these things where, when I sat down and said, okay, it's going to take a lot of videos to get through all this content, but we can do it. Can we really do it? Yes, we can do it. So if you're just joining us, then you're probably wondering why in the world I'm acting a little crazy. It's because we're in video 12 of going through my book, From Debtor to Better, The Details of Debt and How to Get Out. We are spending a little time basically going through the book chapter by chapter and section by section because it really is the best way I have found to get somebody on board for, hey, here is how you can get out of debt. Now, as I've said in every other video, you don't require the book to be tagging along with us, although it is helpful. And there's some information in there that I don't cover in these videos just because of the time associated with them. But up to this point, we've talked about sort of how to get your financial footing where you need it to be so that you can establish a budget, so that you can understand the basics of having some safety nets, buy insurance or an emergency fund and all that kind of good stuff. And today we arrive on the second half of the video on how you're working on getting out of debt. Tackling debt is the chapter that we're actually working in. So I gave you a little homework in the last video, and that was to decide the order that you wanted to tackle your debts. I talked a little bit about the debt snowball in that video, and I'll talk a little bit more about it in this video. I said, you can approach it from the debt snowball approach. You can look at the interest rates. You can look at the way that they aggravate you in the most, order them based on that. There's all kinds of options. So we're just going to look at it today from the standpoint of the 5 simple steps that I teach everybody when it comes time to get out of debt. Now remember, up to this point, we have to have built our foundation by understanding the concept of a budget, committing to live on a budget, setting up an emergency fund, and doing some of that kind of stuff. So that's why I've been giving you the homework that I have. If you're just now watching and this is your first video, be sure to go back and check out the others so you really understand where we're headed. So the steps are not all that complicated. In fact, that's why I say they're the 5 simple steps. So let's dive into them. I went over them briefly in the last video. We're going to dive in a little more depth today. So the very first thing that we got to look at is step 1, cut expenses. Now, I know that's super obvious. Hey, guess what? When you're in debt and you're trying to get out, don't spend as much money. This is the facepalm moment, right? This is where you're like, okay, really, Barry? This is why I'm watching this video? But listen to me, okay? Pay attention. You're going to learn some things. Here's the thing where I'm telling you. Say no to a lot of the stuff you've just ignored, okay? Say no to the stuff that you just spend your money on and don't think about. This is when you're going to be vigilant. We're talking about hardcore looking at every expense that comes into your home or every dollar that goes out of your home, whichever way you want to look at it. I want you to pay attention to every single dollar that you spend and say, okay, am I supposed to be spending this money? If I'm supposed to be spending this money, great. I'm going to spend it. If not, should I be? Or should it go toward my debt? Should I really try to focus on whatever happiness that I'm getting from that, $2.50 convenience store soda? Or would I be better served by paying $2.50 toward debt and wait until I get home to drink a water? Again, I don't know what your issue is. I don't know what money you spend that maybe you shouldn't, but cut every expense. This is from, like I said, the convenience store Coke, all the way to your cable bill, all the way to your mortgage, all the way to every single thing that you're paying. I want you to look at every single expense carefully. And then I want you to make sure that you answer the question, do I absolutely need this expense? If I don't, then why am I paying it? If you do need it, great. Then the question to ask is, how can I reduce it? Now, that's sort of a revisitation of what we were looking at a little bit earlier if the math didn't work of your situation when we were doing the budget. But this is where we're focused on getting out of debt. So we're going to cut every expense we can cut to the bare minimum. And also, I want you to remember that you're saying no to every expense that you can because you're on a mission. This is a season. This is a temporary thing. This doesn't mean that you can't have fun. This doesn't mean that you're never allowed to go on vacation again. It doesn't mean that you're not allowed to drive a nice car or have nice things or wear nice clothes or anything. We're on mission for a season. Say no to every expense you can possibly say no to. All right, that's step 1. Notice that I spend a couple of minutes on that because I want you to understand the seriousness of it. Once again, the math formula for personal finance is income minus savings minus expenses equals 0. If you can cut the expenses, then you automatically are working with more income that you can throw toward debt, okay? There's step 1. Step 2, maximize your income. Again, this is another one of those face palms. Well, duh, Barry. Of course I want to make as much money I can. If I had $1 bajillion, I wouldn't be in debt. Well, maybe you would, because it's about behavior, not about the money most of the times. But think with me for a moment. If you're cutting expenses, then you're already gaining some income that you can throw toward debt. But then if you say on top of that, you know what? What if I picked up a second job? Or what if I, worked on that side hustle a little bit more? Or what if I sold some stuff? When Stacy and I were actually most recently trying to build up the budget to remodel our kitchen, we were also going through KonMari, the decluttering thing. Now right now that's really popular. 3 years ago when we were doing it, it was like, what? I've never heard of this thing before. But what we did is basically went through everything in our house and said, does this bring me joy? If the answer was no, do I have to have the thing? And if the answer is still no, let's sell it or donate it. It goes away. And we made all of the money almost necessary to remodel our entire kitchen, and we did a really nice remodel. So whether that's selling stuff like we did, whether that's picking up side jobs like when we were getting out of debt, when we committed at the beginning of 2011, I should know the answer to this, I think it was 2011, to getting out of debt, we said, you know what, we're going to do this, we're going to get out of debt, and all right, how do we go about it? Well, why don't we see if we can earn some extra money? So I started trying to do some stuff on the side, and so did Stacy. It was amazing how much extra income we were able to generate just because we were committed to trying. Once we told people, hey, if you have anything that I can do to pick up some extra cash, let me know. Whether, again, maybe that's working some overtime at your job, whether that's having yard sales on the weekends instead of going to them to buy stuff you don't need, whether that's, whatever. How can you legally and morally earn some extra income? Again, we're on a mission here. This is a temporary thing. This doesn't mean that you're going to have to work 2 or 3 jobs the rest of your lives and that you'll never see your kids again. And oh my goodness, here's my message. Do all you can to bring in extra money legally, morally, and without major expense to your family. And by expense to your family, I mean, I'm talking about emotional. Because guess what? Sometimes if you're working harder, that means you're not home as much. And that's okay for a season. But don't kill your marriage or destroy the relationship with your family over this, okay? That stuff's more important. Money is definitely not as important as those things. But make as much money as you can. Simple stuff so far, right? I told you 5 simple steps. So the next thing, step 3, get current on everything. Now this is something that you don't hear very often. This is the input that you will not hear when you read the books by Dave Ramsey or by Crown Financial Ministries or all these others. This is not something that they normally talk about as one of their steps, and neither is my step 5, which we'll get to in a minute. But get current on everything. This should be a given. If you currently are not past due on any bills, you're done with this step. You don't have to worry about it because you're finished. But this step is very important because a lot of people will try to start attacking their debt and never consider the ones that are past due, which means that they have late fees every month, which means that they have additional or probably the highest possible finance charges and interest rates and all this kind of stuff. They don't really think about that so much. They just start saying, all right, I'm going to pay extra on all my bills. And that's their strategy. That's not the best strategy to take. So you've cut your expenses, which means you've got a little more income to work with of what you already had to start with. You've maximized your income, which means that every penny you can scrape together from working extra or doing all that stuff, so you've got more money to work with. That's the point of steps 1 and 2. Step 3 is to bring anything that's past due up to date. So if you've got late fees accumulating because you're behind on bills or you've got collections folks calling and all that kind of stuff, this is the time that you take care of that. You want to do that before you start attacking all your other debts, because every single month that you're past due, you get a late fee. Again, it's hurting your credit, and so you're getting those finance charges and you're getting the higher interest rates and all this other kind of stuff. And while I don't really care about your credit score, and we'll talk about that later, I do care about you behaving financially. And every time you get a late fee, that's just a gotcha. So this step 3 is just to avoid the gotchas of the financial world. Poor people pay late fees. Poor people pay finance charges they don't need to pay. Poor people behave in the mindset of, I'll just throw a little extra on it when I can. No, we are attacking everything that's past due to bring it up to date so it's not a burden in our lives from the standpoint of all those calls, all that emotional mess. You now have all your bills up to date. With me so far? Now, there is one exception, the one little asterisk here, and if you look at this in my book, I explain it in a little more detail, but this is the point of, now, if you've got these really, really old debts, maybe you've got an old medical bill that's 10 years old, and it's still out there, and we're trying to obey the biblical principle that only the wicked borrows and does not repay. I'm not telling you not to pay it, but if you've got this old dormant debt that's laying out there, don't wake that thing. Don't wake them up yet, because the moment you wake that one, I promise they want to get paid. We're talking about the ones that are actively pursuing you if you're in collections, or the ones that are just sort of hassling you, getting you a late fee here and there and a letter on occasion. So don't wake the sleeping giant of old debts. Don't wake those. That's a totally different thing. We're working right now on getting all the debts that are past due, that are aggravating us and charging us fees and all that. We're working on getting those knocked out. Okay, there's also this idea of time-barred debt. It's in the book. I don't want to go over it here, but if you want to Google time-barred, B-A-R-R-E-D, debt, then there's some interesting information you can learn there about your state laws associated with old debts. That's all I'm going to go to on step 3. Let's move into step 4. Step 4 is the debt snowball. Now, I talked in the last video about some various ways to approach getting out of debt, and I really do believe that the debt snowball, which is popularized by Dave Ramsey, is the best way to go. Why? Because it's easy. It's super, super easy. It's not about math, just like getting out of debt is not, just like getting into debt is not, because if you think about it, most of the time you did a poor job with your behavior and that got you into debt. This really helps you to change the behavior in a way that's simple and also meaningful. So let me explain it really easily. First, you look at the balance of everything you owe. So if you've got a car loan and 2 credit cards and a student loan and a mortgage, you order those from smallest to largest based on the total amount that you owe. You pay the minimums on everything. So you pay your minimum payment on all the debts that are outstanding, and then whatever extra cash that you've got that you can scrape together, you pay it all the way toward that smallest debt with the goal of making it go away quickly. That's it. It's not complicated. It's not the best mathematically, but when you've got that small debt that you can attack, when it's gone, never to come back again. So would you rather have 20 small debts, or would you rather have 19 small debts? Would you rather have 20 debts in general, or would you rather have 19 in general? Think about it. So get them gone. That's the purpose of the debt snowball. Order the balance from smallest to largest and pay everything extra on the smallest that you can. Now remember, we're bringing everything current, and then we're ordering everything smallest to largest and getting rid of it. One little thing here that I'll put as a caveat on this one is don't neglect your emergency fund. Now, this is not the big, massive emergency fund. This is the one I talked about earlier on where I said to always live a paycheck ahead. Don't live paycheck to paycheck. Always have an emergency fund to cover anything that might come up. If something comes up, and it probably will during this whole process, the very moment that you become aware, hey, I'm going to have to use some of my emergency fund, then you shift your mindset to rebuilding that emergency fund back. That is priority 1. Every extra thing you can throw goes back into the emergency fund. Then you just resume your debt snowball. That's all there is to it. All right? Moving into step 5. Now, this is another one. You do not hear this commonly. In fact, I don't know that I've ever seen this advice given anywhere else, and I hope that doesn't mean it's bad advice, but it's something that I learned when I was in the collections world. When I worked in collections, it was a credit card company, one of the world's largest, and we had policies in place that basically said, hey, we want to do the right thing for our customer because we want them to like us. We want them to stay our customer, and guess what? If it costs us a little money, it's a lot cheaper to keep an existing customer than it is to go find a new one. So we want the customer to be happy. So how are we going to deal with that? We are going to say, all right, if you call in and you pay us a payment, then we'll waive a fee if you ask. Or we'll waive some finance charges if you ask. It really came down to asking. So I'm not telling you to call your credit card company every month. I'm telling you to call them when you're ready to pay that bill off. So make a phone call before you pay the thing off. But here are a couple things you need to keep in mind. Number 1, it's uncommon advice, but it's super easy. Okay, so don't look at other books and say, well, they don't tell me to do that. Trust me, I worked in collections long enough to know that this will work oftentimes. Call when you're ready to pay it off, which means you have cash in hand. You have money in hand. So if the balance is, $1,500, don't call them with $200 and say, hey, will you make the rest of this go away? No, that's not how this works. We are trying to pay off our debt and gain a benefit of a waived late fee or some waived interest or those kinds of things to just save you a little money as you pay it off. Next, we're also not looking for a settlement. Now, that's a term in the debt world and the credit world and all this kind of stuff. Just know that you're not wanting a settlement. You are wanting a payment in full. You want to pay the thing off entirely. Settlements come about when the company says, you know what, you're such a bad person when it comes to your bills. You're such a bad thing. You're so bad at paying them off. If you'll just give us something to make it go away, then we'll just call it done. And that hits your credit negatively, and it also doesn't pay what you owe. So most of the time we're not looking for a settlement. We are looking for, hey, I have $1,500 in hand because I got my tax refund. I have a $1,500 bill that's sitting in front of me and I want to make it go away. Let me do a little role play. Pick up the phone. Hi, this is Barry Myers and I have this bill that's $1,500. The balance is sitting right there and I just want to pay this thing off. If I pay that in full, will you waive the last month's or a couple months worth of interest for me? Sit and wait. Sit and wait. And wait for them to try to react to that. Most of the time, probably around 70% of the time. Now, it varies. My percentage on that varies based on my recent, I don't know, my recent experiences with it, because I sometimes help people through this part of the process. Pick up and make the phone call. Hey, this is Barry Myers. I'm getting ready to pay this debt off, but I'm wondering if I pay it in full, would you waive a couple of months worth of interest charges for me? Or if it's been past due, would you waive a few late fees for me? So just cut me a break as I pay the thing off. And just sit there and wait. And if they say no, then say, is there any reason why you're unable to do that? You're always nice. You're always focused on the facts. And it's just like a negotiation where you're pushing and pushing just for a little bit more until you get the best deal you can get and then be ready to pay them off. It's that simple. They waive the fee. You pay the balance. Done. Don't pay the balance first. Make sure they waive the fee and you pay the balance. It's not real complicated, but it's very, very, very simple. Let me give you an example of why this makes sense, because some of you are terrified. You're like, I can't call. No, I cannot call them, can't do it. All right? I gave you an example in the book, and I wrote it down here. $1,500 balance, that's at 29% interest rate. And you think, 29%, that's not unreasonable. That actually happens to a lot of people. So say you have a $1,500 balance at a 29% interest rate. You can pick up the phone, and in less than 15 minutes, if they waive 1 month's worth of interest, that's $37. Now, it's roughly 37, depending on how they calculate the interest and how it accrues. But if I said for 15 minutes of your day you'd earn 37 bucks, how many times would you make 15-minute phone calls? And I don't know about you, but I'd make a bunch of them in most days. I'd sit down and be like, okay, I ain't taking lunch break today. I'm going to keep making those phone calls. 15 minutes, okay, $37 times 4, and there's your hourly rate. That's a pretty good hourly wage for just making some simple phone calls. So don't overlook that last step. Let me recap. Step 1, cut all your expenses. Cut everything that you can to the bone, understanding you need to be reasonable, but cut everything you can cut. Number 2, maximize your income. Do those side jobs. Do that side hustle. Sell stuff, eBay or yard sale or whatever. Work some overtime. Maximize your income. Understand that both of those are for a season. Number 3, get current on all of your debt. Do not be past due. Do not be past due on your bills. Do you hear me? Get them all caught up. Step 4, the debt snowball. Again, you're ordering your balances smallest to largest, paying everything extra that you can on that smallest one while you can still pay the minimums on all the rest, okay? And then step 5, when you are ready to pay off a bill, and only when you have the money to pay it off, pick up the phone and then say, hey, will you waive some interest, or will you waive some late fees, or whatever it might happen to be? Will you reduce the overall balance if I agree to pay it in full today? It's that simple. Those 5 steps. Do that, do that, do that, and you will find that you can pay off your debt just following those steps. It doesn't have to be complicated. There's all these complicated formulas and messy stuff. Don't make it hard. If it's not simple, you won't do it, I won't do it. Let's keep it simple. Got it? Okay, so homework for today. Homework for this video is pretty broad. I wanted to be more specific, but this is one where I need to be broad. I want you to sit down and I want you to, steps 1 and 2, make a list of at least 10 expenses you can cut. Make a list beside of that of at least 10 things you can do to bring in some extra income. Now, again, that's almost repeat homework that we've done before when we were working on our budget. But right here, we're focused on doing it for the purpose of getting out of debt. So first thing we're going to do is write down 10 ways that we could cut expenses. Second thing we're going to do is write down 10 ways we can earn some extra income. And then what are we supposed to do? I mean, obviously, we're driven toward action here. So we write those things down, then we go do them. So that's all I've got for you today. I hope it's useful. I hope it's helpful. If you've got questions, please ask them and I'll try to help you out. Don't make it hard. It's simple. Keep it simple. All right? Take care.